Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome to another edition of Mosher's Mailbag. This will be now episode 7. So really enjoy doing this. I can't believe we're up to 7 already. And look, I had some great questions this week, some ones that really made me think. Obviously, I think everybody's very excited about Eagles Cowboys and what it could mean if the Eagles win. So I thought this week's round of questions were about as good as we've had here in all 7 episodes of Mosher's Mailbag, and I look forward to asking them. And again, as soon as the game is over on Sunday, things come to your mind, win, lose, you got questions, send it to me. You don't even have to wait for me to send out the message like I do every week. So here we are from my mom's basement, as I always do this. Just kidding. That's a joke. It's actually mine. But got some great questions and going to head and start right away. First question comes from Chris Go Eagles 99. And he's kind of upset about the NFL's trend of re-employing or employing some of the players that you see who are getting in legal troubles. He brought up Reuben Foster. He brought up Kareem Hunt, who is not yet actually employed by anybody, and Joe Mixon in the past. And he kind of wonders how would the Eagles react in a situation like this. And he did bring up the signing of Michael Vick, and that people will point to that and say that they have a history of signing that kind of player. I don't know that they have a history of signing that kind of player who's been under such intense legal scrutiny or has something hanging over him like Reuben Foster does or like Kareem Hunt does right now. Obviously, with the Vic situation, this was kind of after the fact. He had already been serving time in Leavenworth. There had been a couple of years past the actual allegations and what came out and what he pled to with federal agents. So this was kind of Michael Vick was getting out of jail and looking to resurrect his career. He had Donovan McNabb support. He had Andy Reid support. He had paid his service to society at that point by doing jail time, which is a little bit different, I guess, in some of these other cases that Chris is bringing up where, the visceral feeling of it all, whether you saw the video, is still fresh in your mind and it's still a very sensitive subject. So how would the Eagles react in this situation? Well, the only thing we know is that the Eagles did do their homework on the Reuben Foster incident, and I believe the report came out that said that they were the only team that actually called the Tampa police to try to get some verification as to what's going on. So I think that with any of these situations, they have a very good security staff. They have a guy by the name of Dom who, whether it's college prospects or free agents or anything that the Eagles are doing that involves some extra research or knowledge on a player, Dom does a great job of figuring out what's going on, the background information, and things of that nature. So, but everything is case by case, meaning I think the Eagles are going to always explore everything, look at everything. I don't know if they put in any kind of background on Kareem Hunt or any investigation this past week while he was on waivers. He went unclaimed. But it wouldn't make sense right now to even claim Kareem Hunt if he's facing a suspension and he's not even going to play. This is something that the Eagles will probably look at in the offseason or after the NFL has conducted its investigation and come down with a ruling. It wouldn't shock me if, next year the Eagles are, looking to bring Kareem Hunt in. They obviously need a 3-down running back, and it wouldn't shock me if they did it under the protocol of Kareem has met several requirements as far as seeing a therapist or paying his debt for if he winds up getting charged by police. I mean, I don't think they're just going to blindly sign the guy and say all is forgiven. That's not how they treated the Michael Vick situation, and I don't think going forward that's how they would treat a situation with like Kareem Hunt. I tend to think when all is said and done that Kareem Hunt's going to wind up back with Kansas City, back with Andy Reid. I think he's going to have to go through a lot of steps to get his name and his attitude rehabilitated first, but it does seem to me like that's the most likely place for him to wind up when all is said and done. But we'll see in the future as it goes along. The Vic thing, a lot of people said they would never be Eagles fans again. A lot of people said that they were going to give up their tickets for life, and I don't think that really happened. I don't think people just blindly maybe for a little while people had trouble accepting it, but I will just say from my own personal experience covering Michael Vick for the years that he was here in Philadelphia, he was very classy. He was a gentleman. Sure, he had moments like everybody else during some frustrating times where the frustration of losing got to him, especially when he came back after the lockout and didn't have a very good year, but gracious with the media, giving with his time with fans, diligent in his work with Habitat for Humanity. I think was it Habitat for Humanity? Wherever he wound up doing work for. I think with the Humane Society, right? I think that's what he wound up doing. He was a very honest and candid person while he's with the Eagles, and I enjoyed covering him. I think he had a new lease on life after prison, and he was determined to be a better person. And from what I read about him in Atlanta and what I observed firsthand about him as an Eagle, I think we're completely different people. So that is a case where the Eagles took a chance. It worked. And Michael Vick, I think, was a pretty good Eagle from player to person while he was here in his career. Next question. Good stuff. And it's from Stephen A. And he asks, are the Eagles rounding into form? And he even asked a follow-up question that I think is more pertinent. And he said, are they rounding into form too late? As I wrote this week on Patreon, I think the biggest thing about the Eagles right now is that their offensive line is dominating up front. Now, yes, you could say the Giants stink, but the Redskins, as bad as they are as a team right now with what they're going through with injuries at quarterback and on the offensive line, their defense wasn't bad. They have 2 first-round picks on the defensive line right there in the middle in Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen. And I was really impressed by the way in both games the Eagles have reset the line of scrimmage, have generated push. If you read the Patreon story that I wrote earlier this week on the offensive line, you'll see that a lot of runs from both Josh Adams and Corey Clement and even Darren Sproles, who played against Washington, a lot of their runs, those guys were not touched for the first 5, 6, 7 yards of their carry. So that means the line is finally getting healthy, finally doing its job. And that's the one thing you remember about last year. Remember that Minnesota Vikings playoff game here at the Link? It's cold, and they just come out and they just pound the ball. I mean, yeah, sure, they threw the ball around a lot, but it seems like every time they ran, you heard that offensive line just driving back that really big, stout, strong defensive line of the Minnesota Vikings. So if I'm going to say that there's one thing that's really different here about the Eagles that might conjure images of last year, it's that they are really playing well up front, and they've got that run game going, and that has led to offensive balance. Perfect example is the Washington game. They win. Nobody has 100 yards, right? Zach Ertz didn't have 100 yards. Golden Tate didn't have 100 yards, but both of those guys had about 80 or 90. Aguilar had about 50. Clement had about 30 receiving yards. Excuse me. So I think the balance is back because the offensive line and the running game have been really dominant the last 2 weeks. It'll be very essential for them to do that Sunday against Dallas. They have to win in the line of scrimmage offensively. They've got to be able to run the ball, and they've got to be able to set up manageable down and distance scenarios for Carson Wentz because the Cowboys have an electric pass rush, and they can get on quarterbacks in a hurry. The Eagles cannot be in second and third and long all day long. They can't expect to win that game that way. But the second part of the question is really important because he says, is it too little too late? And I think it's a great question because most people think right now if the Eagles win this game against Dallas – that they're made for the division, that, hey, they've beaten Dallas. They'll technically be in first place. They'll have the same record as the Cowboys, but they'll have fewer division losses. The Cowboys will have lost to the Eagles, and they have an earlier loss to Washington, while the Eagles only have 1 division loss so far. So that would put the Eagles in first place. But you got to remember, the Eagles have to win. They've got 3 games after that. They've got Houston, they've got the Rams, and then they end with Washington again. Now, you can give them the Washington game, but Houston and the Rams, those are 2 of the 4 best teams in the NFL right now. The Cowboys end with the Colts, not an easy team. It's on the road against the Colts, and then Tampa Bay, and then the Giants. And you just don't know which Tampa Bay and Giants teams are going to show up the last 2 weeks in the season when they're out of it. So the Cowboys very easily could go 2-1. The Eagles could go 1-2 down the stretch. And that means the Cowboys have regained a game on the Eagles. So it wouldn't matter. It doesn't matter if the Eagles and Cowboys, if they finish with the same record, then it helps the Eagles. But if the Cowboys finish with 1 game, it won't matter that the Eagles beat them. If the Cowboys finish 1 game ahead, they win the division. So to answer the question, you hope it's not, but it might be that it's a little bit too little too late, that they just found their rhythm at the wrong time. But still, their destiny is in their hands. Beat Dallas, then just take one of those 2 games against the Texans and the Rams, and then finish off with a win against the Redskins in the season finale, and I think that they'll be good to go. But just because they beat the Cowboys does not mean all the work is done. They're going to have to keep that up. Great question there by Stephen. Next question by Kevin W. By the way, I appreciate everybody's also with their questions had some really nice comments. They enjoy the coverage. Ask me how I'm doing. I'm loving it. I would love to have more subscriptions. Of course, just because you want to. I want to be able to make that donation soon to Wounded Warrior Project for every 100 I get. But B, I'm obviously trying to generate as much of an audience on my own as possible. But I'm really enjoying doing it. I really like the breakdowns. I really like the analysis that I'm able to provide. So I appreciate everybody who's been asking questions and reading and subscribing. Kevin W says he notices what he thinks is a lack of hustle from defensive backs, and he wonders if it's just him or if it's more of a function of they're playing off coverage, so they're not always there. I think take a game like last week. You saw Rasul Douglas, who was matched up against Josh Doxson, a first-round pick receiver who really hasn't done much, and Doxson got him twice for big games. And when you watch it on TV, you'll see Doxson make the catch, and it looks like Rasul Douglas is nowhere to be found. But a lot of times when you watch it on the coach's film, the All-22, what you'll see is Rasul just gets lost by a really good route. Right now he's having a lot of struggle with his techniques, and it looks like maybe he's not hustling, but a guy makes a quick out to the left and comes back inside to the right, and Rasul is, still playing that outside technique and has to then get back inside or vice versa. And you see he just gets, lost by 5 or 10 yards. The only time I really noticed lack of hustle was the first game against Dallas when they threw that screen to Rod Smith on 3rd and 15 and got 14 yards. Ronald Darby had a chance to come up into a hole and just make the tackle on Rod Smith about 7 or 8 yards into the play, and he just completely stopped. He took himself out of the play. Now, Ronald Darby's not playing anymore. He's on IR, so that's not as much of an issue. But I got to say, over the last 2 or 3 weeks, given all the injuries that the Eagles have had in the secondary, I mean, you're playing Chandon Sullivan, you're playing Crayvon LeBlanc, right? You're playing Trey Sullivan at safety. You're really beat up there. I think that they've held their own and played fairly well. But I do think that Rasul Douglas is struggling with his technique. I think Sidney Jones is also not a very good tackler, so maybe it looks like bad hustle or unwilling effort, and a lot of times he's just diving at ankles. It's just bad technique. But you got to remember, Sidney Jones was an outside corner at Washington. He was forced to play the slot. Then he got hurt. He's dealt with a lot of injuries, so maybe in the back of his head that every time he tries to make a play, he gets hurt. I really don't know what it is, but I wouldn't question hustle more than technique and fundamentals. I think that's fair to say. Let's see. Last question came from Zach K, and this one was a mouthful. He kind of wondered about the Eagles' offense, which had been disappointing, obviously, up until the last 2 weeks, and the impact of losing John DeFilippo, who is the quarterback's coach and is now the offensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings. And he's suspecting that maybe DeFilippo gets fired after the year because the Vikings' offense hasn't been very good, and he's wondering if maybe DeFilippo would come back here, if Mike Rowe would then be replaced. I'm going to say this. I don't think Doug is giving up on Mike Rowe. I think that we kind of beat a dead horse on the point on losing Frank Reich and DeFilippo. I absolutely think it has an effect. But that's also part and parcel of the NFL. Bill Belichick loses assistants all the time. I mean, he's had so many of them, both on offense and defense, go on to be head coaches, and yet they bring back a quality team every single year. That helps to have Tom Brady. It helps that Bill is so smart. But again, if they didn't do a good job, the Patriots, it wouldn't be about the assistants. It would be about Bill Belichick. You would say he's not doing a good job. So I would say don't worry so much about Press Taylor as quarterback's coach and Mike Rowe as offensive coordinator. Could they be doing good jobs, better jobs? Sure. Is there concern that Press Taylor is really in his first time as a quarterback's coach and how aggressively and how hard he's coaching Carson compared to DeFilippo, who had already been an offensive coordinator, who was a veteran, and who in general didn't take BS from anybody? Yeah, I think that that's part of it. Okay. But I think the big deal is that this is on Doug. Doug is the head coach. And so if you're disappointed in the play calls, don't blame Mike Rowe. It's Doug Peterson's offense. They all collaborate. They all draw it up. But this is all on Doug Peterson. So if you've been disappointed, you should be disappointed with Doug. But I would say over the last 2 weeks, with the health of the offensive line, with Corey Clement and the running game getting better, with the addition of Golden Tate and his familiarity, I think Doug is starting to show that it's not just he got stupid overnight. It's just that he wasn't dealing with the deck that he started the season with, or he was hoping to start the season with. And that parlays into Zach's next question about losing Blunt and Ajayi and who he felt was the biggest loss to the offense from an injury standpoint. Well, I do think losing Ajayi really hurt them offensively because he's what Josh Adams is now. Plus, he can also catch the ball. He's a little bit more of a three-down back. He's a Pro Bowler. When you have Jay Ajayi, you're just punishing a defense. LeGarrette Blount, I thought he was a great player last year. He's in Detroit this year. He's averaging like 2.5 yards a carry. He's not doing much. I thought losing Jay Ajayi at the same time where Sproles was out and Clement was banged up with the quad really hurt this offense. Now you see Adams kind of being what Jay Ajayi was as a power inside runner. You're seeing Corey Clement come back. To me, the biggest thing about the offense, though, is what it still lacks and can't have is that downfield threat, speed threat that Mike Wallace was supposed to bring. So to answer the question, I think losing Mike Wallace was the most impactful injury on the Eagles offense because that guy, kind of like Torrey Smith last year, he doesn't have to make a catch to be impactful. He can stretch a defense. He can draw a flag. He still had that speed. I know the next-gen stats in the Tampa Bay game, or maybe it was the season opener against Atlanta where he didn't have any catches, but the next-gen stats measured him as running 2 of the fastest routes in the league. So it's that speed that they were looking for. They did try to make an attempt to get Amari Cooper. There was a report that they tried to get Robbie Anderson from the Jets, who is a speed receiver, former Temple guy. In the end, Howie wound up just getting the best available player he could get, and that's Golden Tate, who's a quick lateral movement guy, not necessarily a speed downfield guy. But you see Doug is working it into the offense, and they're figuring some things out. But I definitely think that the Mike Wallace injury hurt them more than people realized. Someone asked me, by the way, I forgot to get back to it, about the trades. Amari Cooper going to Dallas and obviously the Eagles getting Tate, and who was the winner of that trade? I don't know why I can't remember who asked me that question. Oh, that goes back to Chris, who asked the first question. I think it's fair to say that Dallas won the trade, but I don't think that means that the Eagles were not right to go get Golden Tate. It's just Dallas really needed Amari Cooper. If they didn't get Amari Cooper, I don't even think we'd be talking about this game right now as the showdown to decide first place. I mean, Dak Prescott takes a lot of sacks. He's not great at diagnosing defenses. He really needed a guy who could just get open that he could throw the ball to. And so that's been a really real help for their offense. Did the Eagles need a wide receiver? Yes, we've been talking about it. You know, Shelton Gibson wasn't doing it. Jordan Matthews isn't the right type of guy to take that many snaps. They needed someone aside from Alshon. So it was very important that they did bring in Golden Tate. But I think that it's fair to say Cooper right now is everything the Cowboys wanted and needed and was just a better overall trade because that's what they needed more. It doesn't make the Eagles trade for Golden Tate bad or irrelevant or a bad deal at all. It just showed you how desperate Dallas was to have some kind of a perimeter threat. All right, that's going to do it for episode 7 of Mosher's Mailbag. I want to thank everybody for submitting their questions, everybody for being subscribers, all your patronage throughout the year. Been very excited about it. Can't wait to do the next one. And like I said, don't wait until, Wednesday or Thursday. As soon as you have a question, message me on Patreon. You don't even have to wait for me to send out the message. And I'll write it down as I do throughout the week and answer it on the next Mosher's Mailbag. All right, take care, everybody. Enjoy the game on Sunday.